Today's product review is on the Valkyrie Voxter MK3 downhill trucks. These trucks are like anything else in the market, man. They're so different. They have like a whole different design. They're a fresh approach to the RKP truck, and today we're going to be finding out, does this design lead to a superior performance? Is it better? Is this truck really good? Does it perform well? Or is it just a gimmick? And if you want to find that out, check out this video. First, big thanks to Conlcusion. He sent me these trucks to review. Shipping out your $400 trucks to some guy in another continent to skate for a while is really something, so thank you, Connor. Quick summary for you guys. Admittedly, my initial impression of the Voxters was a little bit underwhelming. I mean, you have all these people, this legion of diehard fans saying how stable they are, how good they turn, how smooth they are into the slides, and this just wasn't apparent to me within the first few rides. But the more I rode them, the more those things became apparent to me. See, the thing about these trucks is they don't feel different in any huge ways. For example, when you stand on slalom roads, you can immediately feel the difference from other trucks. These are more subtle, and the differences can only be apparent to you after a significant time of riding them. And after a few months on these trucks, I can confirm that they are amazing. They're stable, they're so smooth through the lean, they turn on the dime, and they're so consistent at that edge of traction that I've had so much fun with them, and they've been confidence inspiring for me to try faster stand-up slides. Of course, they certainly do have their downsides, and dialing them in is a particular headache. But what truck doesn't have its disadvantages? Altogether, these trucks are pretty awesome, and I believe the hype is well warranted. Job well done by Valkyrie Truck Co. Okay, another disclaimer. Admittedly, these trucks aren't suited to the type of skating that I'm mostly familiar with. For that, I tend to prefer narrow trucks with a low angle base plate in the rear for mostly hands down skating. I've mostly been using these for freeriding and stand-up slides, which are things I normally do sparingly. So, if my review is not as good, as thorough, or as insightful as normal, that might be the cause of it. But you know, what can I do? Beggars can be choosers. I was lent these trucks, and you know, I'm gonna work with what I have. First off, how do these trucks turn? These trucks don't turn all that much, and when you're going slow, this kind of sucks, but when you're going fast, this isn't really an issue. At faster speeds, you have all the turning you need, and you'll be able to make all the corners. I never once felt like I lacked any turning on actual downhill runs, and yeah, I was quite satisfied with. They do lean a lot though, and it feels like they lean more than they turn. And to get access to all the turning, you're gonna have to lean quite a bit. I've been able to get more turning out of them by using a riser when I set them up. Weirdly as well, these trucks feel more like a 40-degree truck more than a 45-degree truck, and I think that's thanks to all the lean. But of course, not turning too much also translates to stability. And yeah, these trucks are inherently stable and they feel quite solid at speed. They do have a center, but you are going to have to work a little bit to keep them going in a straight line. Unlike other trucks, you don't really feel held in place in that center. For example, Rogues, you're at the center, but it's very easy to quickly dive off of it. But yeah, because it's easy to dive off that center, you still need to be careful with your weight placement and your balancing, but not like that careful. The center is like decently wide. And yeah, you can also accentuate the center and enhance it depending on how you set up the trucks, but more on that later on. Let's talk more about this center. So with these trucks, as I've said, the center is there, but you don't really feel held in place. It's really easy to articulate the truck left or right, and it doesn't take much work to get the truck to turn. What's different is that they don't really have like a insert bushing, a quin pin, or a massive pivot cup holding the hanger in place. The center point is more inherent. It's really hard to describe, but the truck isn't forced to sit in place. It's like it just naturally sits there. And yeah, in this way, they're unlike anything else I've ever skated, and it's not like it's a huge difference. It's subtle, very subtle. And when you finally articulate off that center, you do so in a very milky way. Okay, listen, I know, what the fuck does milky mean? I don't know, but it just makes sense, and bear with me here. Like I've said, the center point is there, but it's really easy to come off it. And when you do come off it, it isn't a sudden dive or a sudden lean. It's very smooth and very controlled. Other trucks that use other slope stopping mechanisms like urethane insert or quin pin, they kind of fight you at that initial point of articulation. Valks don't fight you at all. Of course, in other trucks, things like the insert also provide the return to center and help support you as you go through the lean. Without a similar slope stopping system, it means you don't get any assistance for the return to center in the Voxters. All the support and the return to center is controlled by the bushings in these trucks, and more on that later on. But yeah, ultimately, if I had to describe the center, I'd say it feels like a smoother, less rigid feeling version of a spherical insert. But yeah, if you want a stable center but want to be able to quickly dive off it and into the turn, these trucks are definitely going to be an excellent choice, and I imagine the MK2 slalom versions are really enjoyable to skate because of this. These trucks lean a lot, and I think even saying a lot is an understatement. They are the leanest trucks that I have ever tried. Actually, a big challenge to riding these trucks is either getting used to that lean or setting them up in a way that's going to restrict and control that lean. And yeah, without setting them up accordingly, that lean will feel endless, and a truck that has endless lean isn't the nicest to skate, especially when you're doing stand-up slides with it. You need to have an end to that lean so that you can use that as a point to kick your board out into the slide. Most people need this to skate properly. Some don't, but most do. What usually supports and restricts the lean in most trucks is a cupped, dished or stepped bushing seat, a urethane insert, or a low rebound pivot, and these things just provide support to the hanger as it leans and provide feedback and eventually help provide a stop to that lean. Things like washers also help as well. In Voxters, what's there to control the lean is the bushing seat, the stepped bushing seat, and the pivot. Now the pivot is like really low resistance and it doesn't do much to provide feedback and resistance through the lean. It's really smooth, and that can of course have its advantages but can also have its disadvantages. The bushing seat of these trucks certainly does help with restricting the bushings and providing some feedback and support, but in the face of the unique design of the Voxters, it's not much. The design of the Voxters is so overpowering and you still get like so much lean out of this truck even with the stepped and relatively restrictive bushing seat. And let's look at the past a little bit. When the V1 Voxters came out, they didn't have such a deep bushing seat. It was a little bit shallower, and actually the V1s were known for turning bushings to mush, and people literally had to run super hard bushings to get a decent feel from these trucks. Fortunately, the succeeding iteration of the V1s had a slightly deeper bushing seat. People were able to run much softer bushings more successfully, and I think that same bushing seat is featured on the MK3s. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But yeah, in Voxters, it seems that the work of support, resistance, feedback, and return to center through the lean all has to be controlled by the bushings. The bushings have to do all of that work. And because the bushings are worked so hard, in order to get like decent feedback and support, you either have to use more voluminous bushings or higher rebound ones. Okay, as I've mentioned which bushings tend to work best, let's talk more about how to set up Voxters. These trucks are different from anything else, and you're gonna have to set them up accordingly. You're gonna have to come with it with fresh thinking, and be open to running different types of bushings. And I'm saying that because I know some of you out there are like, ew, I can't run kegs, bro. But if you want these trucks to perform well, you might have to, bro. And I was one of you. Dude. I never thought I'd ever run kegs in my life, but here we are. I'm skating them and I'm loving it. First thing to understand is that standard rebound bushings, if we take like for example the Venom HPF to be like standard, because that's what almost everybody uses, don't really work well in these trucks. They work well in other trucks, but in these trucks they turn to mush. They just flop over and don't provide the best sort of resistance, support, feedback, and all that stuff through the lean. The issue will be most apparent to you if you use double barrels in the HPF formula in this truck. So yeah, they just don't feel good. And higher rebound bushings work so much better in these trucks. By higher rebound, I'm talking about the crank bushings from Riptide, the SHR bushings from Venom, the hardcore barrel bushings from Pal Peralta, and the Ronin bushings from Ronin. These bushings just have a lot more rebound than the HPF Venoms, and they provide more feedback and more resistance when you engage them. So in this case, instead of the truck just like flopping over left to right, you get instead a smooth and controlled lean with a nice amount of feedback. In other trucks, these bushings may rebound a little too much and may bounce you out of the turn, and if you're doing downhill, that's not desirable. But in this case, they work really well in this truck. That said, the HPF Venoms can work if you use the more voluminous versions of them. For example, the Venom keg. You can also use really hard versions of the Venoms. For example, like if you usually use 85A, you could go like 90A or 87A or something like that. But I didn't really like this. With the harder bushing, it just felt like it had like a center point. The truck would suddenly lean, then I'd suddenly get wheel bite. I didn't really get much feedback throughout the lean, and I didn't really like it. That said, when I was doing hands down stuff, I didn't really need that much feedback through the lane, so using HPF barrels was okay. But yeah, it's really going to depend on the person and maybe on your use as well. But back to the keg. So yeah, running more voluminous shapes in this truck felt really good. And this is just not like restricted to the Venoms. You could also run like Riptide Chubbies and whatever else is available out there, and they'll probably feel a little bit better. In this case, I ended up using a HPF barrel in the roadside and a Venom keg in the board side, and both were 87A, and these trucks rode really well. And finally, some people also really like running short barrel bushings. Short barrels just don't lean that much and you get a quicker end to the lean, and yeah, some people enjoyed it. I tried it, but I prefer to have tall barrels and more lean available to me. I don't know, it just felt nicer, but as well, everything is personal preference. But yeah, I ended up running my Voxters with the 87A keg board side and the 87A barrel roadside. When I wasn't using the keg, I would run the 92A red fruit punch bushings from Ronin, and those came in barrels and they were like really nice as well. I also weigh about like 75 kgs or 165 pounds for a bit of reference for you guys for what I liked. But yeah, another thing I really liked about these trucks is how sort of consistent they felt just before you slide. It's like just that moment before the edge of traction. They just felt like so consistent, and I as a rider didn't have to like work really hard to keep them like on point or whatever. I could really rely on the truck to be consistent at that point, and I just had so much confidence like going into slides, going into stand-up slides, or going into corners really hard, knowing I have to chuck like a small slide or I might scrub. I just felt like really comfortable doing that on these trucks because just that moment, they just felt so good. And I know it might sound a little bit crazy to you guys or to people who've never skated these trucks, but at that moment they felt really good, and it's one of the things that's made me really like these trucks. And yeah, it may not translate really well, but when I skated other Precisions, Smokies, Rogues, or Forged trucks, RF1 Savants, I never really got the same feeling. I still had to work a little bit and be on point as a rider to keep the trucks on the line just before that moment of sliding. But with these, it's really good, and I hope I'm not sounding crazy, and I hope like someone can comment and back this up. But yeah. But yeah, and because these trucks leaned a lot, they didn't really like flush mounting. Whenever I set them up with flush mounting on like my free dive, they just didn't feel very good. I had to either pair them with like an 1/8 inch riser or a 1/4 inch riser, you know, either negating the flush mounting or adding a bit more riser on top of negating the flush mounting. Only then did these trucks feel pretty good. But yeah, man, they just don't like flush mounting, and if you're having trouble dialing them in or making them feel good, that might be a reason. So what I didn't like about Voxters is obviously they're quite difficult to set up. If it wasn't for the Longboard family Discord, I would not know how to set up these trucks. I would be running around in circles, trying different things, cursing them out, saying, yo, why are these trucks so hard to set up, bro? Why don't they just feel good? If I didn't have that knowledge and a group of experienced riders telling me what to do, I would be so lost. But yeah, these trucks are hard to set up, and if you're gonna buy them, do reach out to experienced Voxter skaters. The community is really friendly and people would be very willing to help. The other thing that I didn't like is the pivot. Now, there's nothing really wrong with the pivot. This is just a personal pet peeve of mine. I think Riptide pivots are too low resistance and get to that edge too quickly. I think a 97A Venom pivot tube would be really good in these trucks. The lean will still be quick, but it'd be a bit more gradual, and it'll be a lot easier to sort of hold an angle at that lean. With the Riptides, I couldn't really hold an angle. The truck just either wanted to go left and right. And also with the 97A pivot, because it has a little bit of resistance and support, it likely open up the bushing options that you can use as well. You can experiment, maybe lathe or bushing, and try that for yourself. And I don't really think this is a failing of Valkyrie, but more a failing of the aftermarket, more a failing of Venom for not providing a greater variety of pivot tubes for different trucks. But yeah, just something I thought I'd say. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Big thanks to the patrons, big thanks to the subscribers. This one has taken longer than expected to put together. It's really hard to describe how these trucks do the thing accurately, and maybe I've made it more complicated for myself than necessary. But yeah, I haven't spent the most time on these trucks as I do with other products. As you guys know, I spend like months on them before I'm able to like write stuff. I kind of rushed myself in this process, and maybe that's played a part to making the review a little bit difficult. But yeah, hope this review has been insightful. Thank you for watching, and yeah, catch you guys in the next one. Hopefully next week it shall be an RF1 review. Thanks for watching.